Hey everyone, it's Alyssa, and I just saw Oppenheimer over the weekend and would love to give a few of my thoughts after seeing this movie. I'm going to start by saying Chris Nolan is one of the most enjoyable directors where I feel like I just always am on his wavelength. I always see where he's coming from. And I really love the stories that he puts out and the visuals and the message of a lot of the stories. And this one's no different, but it is a little bit different because I did feel like this movie, while it felt definitely like a Chris Nolan movie with the way some of the shots were composed and the music, there were elements that were different. And I don't mean that in a bad way at all. In fact, I was actually happy to see it in so many ways. Like, there was a certain abstract nature to this film and telling the story of Robert Oppenheimer, which is by definition a biopic. And I should probably start off by saying that biopics are my least favorite type of movie that exists, probably. Music biopics, don't be mad at me, being probably the one that I have the most difficulty with. But this movie, well, there are certain beats, of course, that do feel like a biopic because you're just focusing on one person. I did not get the vibes of like a traditional biopic, which I was so happy about, but also kind of expected because Chris Nolan was making the film. And I liked a lot of the aspects that really put you in Oppenheimer's position. And, whether it is cheesy or not, I don't care. I like the fact that when you're seeing his perspective and his point of view, you're getting color in the film. And then when you're not getting his perspective, you're getting the black and white. And I liked that it didn't actually line up with like the time sequences and that you could be seeing the same scene from different perspectives with the color and the black and white. That is obviously incredibly Chris Nolan-esque. So when I say, there were certain elements that didn't a million percent feel like a Chris Nolan movie, I think more what I mean by that is there were some more abstract choices in the film that I appreciated that actually reminded me a lot of, say, Darren Aronofsky, like in a Requiem for a Dream, very, short, sharp cuts with the sound design that's going in, and I appreciated that. There was even like a little bit of a Terrence Malick feel, a little bit to the way he was doing certain sequences. Obviously, the whole movie was not like that because that's not Chris Nolan's style. But I thought it was interesting that he tried to go inward with the character. And there's one scene in particular where I really thought that worked so well. And I'm not going to give a lot of spoilers, but at the same time, I want to be able to talk about the movie, and it is history, so I don't feel like it's giving away too much of anything. But just as a warning, if you haven't seen it, but I think pretty much everyone at this point, or a lot of people have seen it at this point, I'm going to talk about the movie, not giving away like major spoilers, but I will talk about specific scenes. And so the scene that really stood out to me that I thought worked really well in terms of using sort of the abstract nature was when he has to go and he talks to a crowd of people after the bomb has been dropped, and he's seeing people who are excited and happy, and he is not, and he's really thinking about the consequences of actually creating this and being responsible for this and all of the devastation that has been caused and any worry of what will be caused and what will happen to weaponry in the future. And I felt like that sort of like internal struggle and how they use the actual like abstract images to show that, and how they used the feet pounding up and down throughout the movie, and you didn't exactly know what that was referencing, and how the feet pounding sort of sounds like the sound of the explosion. That leads me to the fact that the sound design in this movie is incredible, and I'm so glad I waited to see this movie on an IMAX screen with the sound. I couldn't get the exact seat that I wanted for a couple of weeks, and I was like, I will wait as long as this takes so that I get the full experience. And it was, I mean, really, it was thumping throughout most of the movie, but it was excellent. And the sound design was so effective, especially when there is the actual experiment with the bomb going off, the Trinity experiment. That was such effective use of sound design. So, he used a lot of techniques that I haven't actually seen him use before. And that made me really happy to see that he's growing in all of these different ways. And, he's still using time, but it wasn't as heavy-handed, which, I like a good heavy-handed, use of moving time around. And Memento is maybe still my favorite movie that he's ever made. I will never get over how much I love the film Memento, but it's nice to see that he's growing in so many ways. And with that, I will say it was an incredible achievement for Chris Nolan. But the thing that actually stood out, or the person who really stood out to me the most, was Cillian Murphy. I have loved Cillian Murphy ever since I saw him in 28 Days Later in the movie theater, and was just kind of like, who is this actor? And then went back and saw things like Disco Pigs and The Wind That Shakes the Barley, and watched all of his films. He has always been so underrated, and he started getting popular, of course, with Peaky Blinders and playing Thomas Shelby. But it's nice to see him actually have a lead role in a movie, and to see this relationship that he had with Chris Nolan come to this and feel like every supporting part that he ever did was kind of leading up to this moment and this role and this character. And to really feel what an introverted person feels like, which I believe Oppenheimer was, based on everything that I've read, and knowing that, Cillian Murphy is the same, and I am very introverted as well, that it was to see that visually in a performance, and to see such subtle shifts in facial expression. It was incredible. I just felt like he was so in it. He was so in the character at every single moment. And there is not a moment that he's not on screen. Yes, there's a couple of scenes in a 3-hour movie where you're just seeing Robert Downey Jr.'s character, but for the most part, he is everything. And I loved how subtle it was. I loved that there weren't these like gigantic screamy moments that actually wouldn't fit in with reality at all. And he just was living that character, and I felt it. And it would be shocking if he didn't get a Best Actor nomination. And when I look at the movies that are coming out this year, like, there's nothing coming out besides Killers of the Flower Moon where I feel like, wow, I am so excited to see this movie. And I think this is going to be just a masterpiece, or at least like this is going to be the movie of the year. Like, there's nothing that I have heard that's coming out or seen trailers for where I'm so excited. So I can't imagine someone else winning this, although my hope and desire for him to win means that he absolutely will not win, because nobody ever wins when I want them to. But it would be nice, of course, to see him nominated. And who even knows if there will be awards with the strike and everything. So, I don't know. But I also thought the supporting cast was wonderful. I could not believe how many people were in this film. I was like, now I do not like Casey Affleck, but like even seeing like, wow, Casey Affleck is in this movie, and Rami Malek was in the movie, and Josh Hartnett, where all of a sudden Josh Hartnett is like once again in movies, was in the Black Mirror episode, was in the newest Guy Ritchie movie that I'm not even going to try to pronounce, but was a substantial character here and did a really good job. And I didn't realize Benny Safdie was going to be in the movie, and I thought he was excellent. I thought they were all excellent. And I loved the way that the movie was constructed and how you're kind of jumping into different sequences with Robert Downey Jr.'s character trying to be appointed. I don't remember if it was to a cabinet, Congress, appointed to something. These were all elements of history that I had absolutely no idea about. So I felt like I learned a lot about what was going on, and was not surprised by learning about any of it. And I liked the way they cut in the scenes where it's not a courtroom sequence, but it is the questioning of Oppenheimer and whether he should have the security clearance. There were a lot of people who said that the film went down for them once this last section of the movie happened, because it's still a fairly long section. I'm not sure how long, but I mean, it did feel probably like there was an extra 50 minutes. But I actually thought it was so interesting. And it was interesting just with the dialogue. And I think that's another thing that's surprising. For as much visuals that are in the film, there is a lot of just scenes where characters are talking to each other, and a lot of closed doors and rooms, and a lot of close-ups, more close-ups than I've ever seen in a Chris Nolan movie. And I thought Hoyt Van Hoytema did such a beautiful job filming this, and I can't believe, that they had the black and white film and the IMAX camera and all of these things that they created for the movie. It was spectacular looking. But there were still in the film maybe just a few things where I thought I wish maybe there was a little bit more of the science of everything, and I think it started off that way. But the dialogue that was kind of explaining the science of everything sort of quickly started just disappearing from the story. And I think what makes this work so well is that you're really just getting it from Oppenheimer's perspective, but with that choice, which I think was absolutely the right choice to make, you're going to lose a few things. So, for example, I really thought I wanted to learn more about Kitty, and I wanted to see her perspective a little bit more. For most of the movie, I was kind of like, why is Emily Blunt in this? And then the last scene in the movie, or where the last scene she is in when she is getting questioned, I was like, oh, this is why she's in the movie. She's phenomenal. She just is so strong in that scene. But I wanted a little bit more of the science, a little bit more with her. But of course, that didn't really fit into the way the story was being told. So I understand that. There was just that feeling of you wanted a little bit more. Also, the other thing that I thought would have worked is not that you would see the actual bomb or see how people were affected in a firsthand way, but in that scene, once again, not a spoiler, but still talking about the movie, in that scene where he is seeing people who were affected and we don't see how those people were affected, I thought that was a misstep, because that is sort of the emotional impact that you need with how Oppenheimer is feeling. And the movie is already rated R, so what would it have, mattered? I feel like, and it wouldn't have needed to be real images. They would, you create those images. But that was where it was like, it hits, it has emotion, but was I there 1,000,000%? Not a million. I thought he did a really great job getting the emotion of a lot. I think not everything needed high emotion in that movie, especially because you're dealing with all of these scientists and this very pragmatic way of looking at things. But it was a very fascinating story. And looking at Robert Downey Jr.'s character, now I've heard a lot that people want him to get nominated, and he was great. He was very good. And I think my brain is letting the outside world in. But my friend sent me an article where he had said, he feels like he can do Vertigo better, and that's why he wants to remake that. And I was just like, but my brain can't process that sentence. So it's like, yeah, he was good. I don't know if I need him to get nominated for Best Supporting Actor. He certainly will because he's so famous, and I can't remember the last time he got any kind of Academy Award. The last thing I can think of is Chaplin. Maybe he was nominated for something else, and he was great in Chaplin. But I think most of this film is just perfectly executed. But there were still just those certain little elements that I thought I could have that I wanted that little bit more. But all in all, this was so impressive. I will say it does feel like it's a 3-hour movie, and I don't mean that in a bad way at all. It does sort of have a lot of information it's trying to give you. The score was fantastic. How could it not be? With, oh my goodness, I am not forgetting his name, Ludwig Göransson. How could it not be good with him? There were some parts that I thought were better than others. I thought the use of the string instruments, that whole section was incredible. Some of it sounded a little bit like Hans Zimmer, like older Chris Nolan movies, but there's nothing wrong with that. But all in all, this will absolutely be a movie that's getting nominated for a lot of awards. I appreciated the movie so much. I felt like I learned so much from this film. It was visually spectacular. From an entertainment point of view, will I be able to watch this movie over and over and over again in the same way that I can watch Tenet or Inception over and over, or Memento over and over again? No, probably not, but I don't think it's meant to be that kind of a movie. It is, sorry for the bell, but it was something to really watch and to see this man's struggle with what he did and the effect of how that impacts us to this day. That's what I kept thinking about. I kept thinking as I was watching how essentially fragile everything is and how fragile our existence is as humans, our survival. And most of us have only lived in a world where, nuclear weapons was always a possibility. And it was just such a fascinating thing to see where it started, what the intentions were, how Oppenheimer was treated after being successful, which was not surprising to see at all. But all in all, this is a really well-made movie that I will be happy to put in my collection and own when it comes out with 4K. So I would love to hear what everyone thought about the film. Most people that I've spoken to, they love it. And it's just varying degrees of how much they love the film. So I would love to hear your take. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope everyone is doing well. Bye.